All right. So just to give you a recap of what we were discussing in the last class, we said the B2B market largely is influenced by the dynamics of demand in the market, right? So depending on the kind of demand that is seen in the market is how the industry also is going to, behave in a manner that is appropriate for it. Okay. So what are the, demand dynamics that really are going to that is going to influence. So we're going to look at that. So we looked at B2B markets largely are dependent on the derived demand, because the demand has to be first of all seen in the B2C, and if demand increases in the B2C, automatically the demand in the B2B will also go up. Okay, that is one thing. And in the B2B, when demand for a product goes up, and if there is one particular manufacturer who's going to make a product and then sell that end product to the consumer, the demand is also going to be triggered off for all those suppliers, right? Like for example, the example that you see here is for Harley Davidson. So if demand for Harley Davidson bikes goes up in the B2C market, Harley Davidson as a manufacturer of these high-end bikes, right? So demand is going to increase for Harley Davidson. Automatically, when demand increases for Harley Davidson, the 200 different suppliers that Harley Davidson depends on for all those components like tires, like electrical components, coil springs, aluminum casting, and several other items. 200 suppliers who are supplying to Harley Davidson, their demand also is going to go up. So that is the reason why we need to always constantly keep stimulating the demand in the B2C. When there are more number of consumers who come and buy end products that are manufactured by B2B, automatically that is going to be felt in the B2B market. All right, so this you need to understand, because the next part that we're going to be discussing in detail will be on supply chain. So when demand increases for one particular manufacturer, automatically the demand is triggered through the entire network of all those manufacturers and suppliers who are part of the supply chain. So that's one thing you need to remember, that demand in the B2B market is influenced by derived demand. Secondly, demand also fluctuates, right? The fluctuation in demand takes place because of several factors. It could take place because of the business cycle in which the environment, the country is going through. Whatever is the business cycle in which the country is going through, automatically consumers also are going to be influenced and they are going to behave in that particular manner, right? That's one thing. The second thing is the supply of currency within the economy, right? If there is more circulation of currency or more availability of money in the banking sector, so the banks will give out loans. So automatically when the interest rates, when they decrease the interest rates, or when the Reserve Bank of India comes up with a revised repo and a reverse repo rate, automatically banks will be able to borrow more funds from RBI. When they have more money in the system, then they will be able to give out more money to consumers in terms of loans, right? And the loans, more consumers will be wanting to take more loans only if the interest rate comes down. So now what's happening, I gave you the example of the real estate market in the last class. So what banks are doing right now is they're kind of decreasing the interest rates. So if anybody who's availing a home loan now during the post-COVID scenario, then the interest rate is down by almost about 0.5% or by 1%. So earlier it was around 8.5%. Now somebody is able to get loans at around 7.5 or at 7%. So when that interest rate, when that attractive interest rate is going to bring more number of consumers to come and avail loans, so automatically they will be in a position to take more loans, and with that more loans, they will have more disposable income, and with that more disposable income, they are going to go and purchase various goods and services. So the second aspect is that happens. So whenever there is fluctuating demand, when the B2B industry sees a certain slowdown or it sees a certain slump, and then production slows down, when all of this happens, automatically you will see government and other institutions taking various measures to increase the demand. So demand fluctuates. So this is something that we need to understand. So when you go back to that previous example and you see it, if demand fluctuates in the B2C market, automatically, if you are Harley Davidson, Harley Davidson as a manufacturer will also be able to see this kind of a fluctuation. So when Harley Davidson fluctuates, when they are able to experience a fluctuated demand, right? So when they decrease the quantity of what they were purchasing earlier, so those 200 different suppliers who are tied or who are tagged to Harley Davidson will also be able to see that kind of fluctuation. So they will be in a position where they will not be able to actually read the demand in the market. So it makes a little difficulty for them to really read demand and then make an understanding of what quantity we need to stock up, what quantity we need to supply in the market, what quantity should be available in the system. So that's where that fluctuation happens. So when it fluctuates in one end, automatically it fluctuates through the supply chain. So that's something that we need to understand in the B2B market. Third is we need to stimulate demand. So if there is a certain slowdown and if the entire B2B industry is going through a certain lull and they don't see a certain increase in production, increase in demand, increase in distribution, then the government and various other institutions need to stimulate demand. So the government will stimulate demand through the banking system, through the reverse repo and the reverse repo rate, as we understand. So through that, one way we try to do that. Secondly, we bring about a lot of policy changes. Sometimes rules are tweaked, and sometimes limits that we have. Sometimes limits are capped, limits are increased. So more quantity can be imported, more quantity can be manufactured. Certain items which were earlier restricted for use by the B2B now will be allowed. So all of that little bit of policy changes we will make, whatever we think is an obstacle or whatever is a hurdle for consumers to come and buy. So when those hurdles and obstacles are removed, automatically you will see demand increasing. That is one way we do. Naturally, all organizations also will do this. All manufacturers and all organizations also have their own marketing and advertising programs. Through the marketing and advertising programs, they are trying to stimulate a demand to ensure that more number of people, more consumers will start coming and buying their goods and services. That is one. The second thing is when these marketing programs and advertisements are targeted at new buyers. So new buyers who are first time, buyers and users will also be attracted. So that is also a potential segment that the government will try to do. So that's how we try to stimulate demand to ensure that that's how it happens. Uh, but somebody told me that they were able to see the PowerPoint.
So we can see the PowerPoint.
Now you can see it. I asked you in the beginning, so you all said, yeah, yes, I can see the PowerPoint is what somebody told me. Okay, now can you see that?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay, that's good. So there is derived demand. B2B is influenced by derived demand. B2B is derived, B2B functioning depends on the demand because of the fluctuation that takes place in the industry and in the market. Thirdly, we need to stimulate demand if we want to increase. So that's another aspect that we need to keep in mind. Okay, and sometimes demand is also joint. We say joint demand. So, joint demand generally happens when a lot of goods are tied, a lot of products are tied to the making of one particular product, right? So it could be for B2B, it is generally like that. B2B companies don't just buy from one company or two companies. They generally have close to about 50, a minimum of 50 suppliers. Every nut and bolt or every small tool, every component, everything that goes into the product is actually something that comes from different suppliers, right? So companies don't make the whole product, right? So they don't build the whole product from scratch. They don't buy raw materials and then they start doing things like that. Now what happens is manufacturers are very smart in their decision making. They only retain certain components of the manufacturing that they think is very important for them. Rest of the things are outsourced, right? So rest of the components, sub-assemblies, semi-finished products and components, all of these are outsourced to various manufacturers. So what the company mostly buys is a semi-finished component. But a semi-finished component is sold by a certain supplier. All that the company has to do is it brings it to the factory and then assembles it, and then the final product is ready, and then it starts selling. That is how it works. So there is joint demand, which means when the demand for one particular product component goes up, then automatically those 50 different suppliers, even demand for them also will increase. So generally, most of the products in B2B, because of this concept of supply chain, everything is connected to the demand. And then once demand is high, it's the same for everybody. If demand is low for one manufacturer, automatically demand is low for all the others. Then there is price sensitivity, right? Price sensitivity generally is seen in the B2C market because consumers are the ones who are very sensitive to price, right? When there is a price fluctuation, then automatically, they start responding. Consumer behavior also is according to how price is, right? So that's why we said the law of demand operates in the B2C market. So when price is reduced for a commodity, automatically demand increases. So when demand increases, automatically all the B2B manufacturers will be able to now buy more raw materials. They will be able to produce more goods. They will be able to supply more goods, and they will make sure that goods are, available to the market at the time when consumers need it. Inelasticity happens only when consumers, do not respond to a price change. So there are certain commodities that are regular commodities, irrespective of whether the price is high or low. We have to buy those. Those are regular, normal commodities that we have to buy. So for those kind of commodities, there is no, the market does not operate. Price sensitivity does not really work. Whether the price is 50 rupees or whether the price is 100 rupees, you will definitely buy it. Like for example, what we've seen in the vegetable case, right? Generally, if you see, vegetable prices in the last 2 months have been on a high. Not just onions, but all vegetables slightly have been on the higher side because of rains in many places, because of supply chain obstruction, because of lockdown and things like that. A lot of goods were, damaged. A lot of goods were, were spoiled on the field itself. Right, so that's where there was a little crunch because there was not enough supply that was available in the market. So hence price went up. So when price went up, what do you do? Now vegetables are expensive. So does that mean that you're not going to buy vegetables and cook? Use vegetables for your cooking? No, we do. So what we do is we keep buying them in smaller quantities. We don't buy like how we used to buy. So we buy in smaller quantities, and then we look for vegetables that are slightly cheaper in price, and then we use those vegetables. And then the ones that we often used to buy, we reduce the quantity. So, but we don't do away with it. It's not that you stop buying. Like for example, if carrots are expensive, it's not that you stop buying carrots completely. You buy carrots, but you buy them in small quantities, right? So demand to an extent will be affected by price, price sensitivity. But in the B2B market, there are several commodities. Whether the price is high or low, you will definitely buy. Like for example, smartphone is one good example of that. Whether it's high or low, now it's become an essential commodity. People will go ahead and buy it. Now, if you want to buy your own house, there again, even if it's slightly expensive, people don't mind. They will somehow manage and meet ends. Now, car has become a necessity, so it's like that. Computers have become necessities. Tabs have become necessities at homes. So all of these are there, irrespective of price sensitivity. People will respond. So you need to understand in the B2B, are you operating or are you selling a product which is highly sensitive to price, or whether it is insensitive to price? If it's highly sensitive to price, then your strategy is very different. But if you are operating on a product where there is no sensitivity, or the sensitivity is low, you don't have to bother, because even if the price is high, people will definitely come and buy from you. So demand is not going to go down for those kind of commodities. So you need to understand what product in which you are operating. So that is going to help you to make that kind of decision. So these things are very, very important, because when you get into the B2B strategy making, these concepts are very important, because you need to know, as I told you in the last class, that you need to know what product that you are operating. Depending on the product that you are operating, manufacturing and selling, and then how that product is going to respond in the B2C market, and how does it operate to the conditions of demand in the B2C market, based on that, you have to make certain appropriate decisions. Okay, so and then we came into the type of products that we are looking at. Right, this is where I stopped my last class. So there are typically three types of commodities that we are going to talk about in B2B. The first type of commodities are called entering goods. So these are part of the finished commodity. So when I gave you the Harley Davidson example, Harley Davidson is a whole bike that you see. But all those different components that have gone into it, right, are all part of the bike. So if a supplier is selling a particular component, let's say for example the battery unit is outsourced to a manufacturer. A manufacturer just makes that battery unit, which is sold to Harley Davidson. So what Harley Davidson is going to do is just going to take that battery unit, and at the time in the production when the battery unit needs to be fixed to that particular vehicle, they're going to do that. The same thing they're going to do with handles. Handles are going to be ready made and brought to the factory. Tires are going to be ready made and brought to the factory. Spokes and wheels, tubes, everything is going to be semi finished, and it's going to be part of the product. So what the supplier in the B2B is going to sell to Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson, so those components and parts are going to be part of the bike that is being built or assembled by Harley Davidson, and that is ultimately sold to a customer. These are called entering products. So entry products become a part of the finished commodity, and when it is sold to a consumer, it goes along with the product, right? And the cost of these products are part of your cost of production. So when you calculate your cost, the cost of production. So when Harley Davidson fixes a particular price for the bike and says this is the cost of the bike, it includes all those parts that have gone into the Harley Davidson bike. Okay, this is called entering goods. So goods or components that are sold by a B2B manufacturer to a main manufacturer. So those components become a part of the product and they go along with the product when it is sold to a consumer. And that is included as cost of the production, which is part of the price that is calculated, the price that is sold, price at which the bike or the product is sold to the customer. That's how it is recovered. Second thing, we have foundation goods. So foundation goods are all your capital items, all your assets, machinery, equipment, land, building, all of those that are there. These are foundation goods because without these goods, you will not be able to manufacture. Like for example, a factory. If you don't have a factory, you cannot manufacture bikes or let it be any other good. So a factory is needed, building is needed, furnitures are needed, machines are needed, equipments are needed. All those cranes and all those material handling equipments that are used in the factory are all going to be purchased. All of that is going to be purchased and the factory is going to use it. Right now, the difference here is these assets and equipments do not become a part of the product. They only facilitate, they only act as foundation for the main goods that are manufactured. But what happens to these assets over a period of time is they go through depreciation. So that is where we calculate the depreciation cost for machines, equipment, and all the assets. And then we purchase at the time when these assets are no more functional or they go in for repair. So that's when we decide that we want to purchase new commodities. I mean, we want to replace the asset by purchasing a new asset or an equipment. This is a foundation, right? Third is facilitating. On one side, you have entering goods that become a part of the product. On the other, you have foundation goods. Those are assets, machinery, and equipment, all those physical assets that you see that only help in the manufacturing of the good. Then we have facilitating products, right? So facilitating products will be all those expenses, overhead expenses that we have, right? All of that that is going to facilitate or that's going to help in the support functioning of the manufacturing. So this could be documentation charges, this could be paper charges, this could be about software that we are using, for our manufacturing, all those different specialized techniques or software like CAD and CAM, all those design softwares that we are using, that could be a part of it. Or for example, we are using a Six Sigma concept and then we are hiring a certain company to do quality checks for us. So that hiring company's consultation charges, legal charges, all of these could be a part which is called the facilitating products, right? So these are typically the three types of categories, three categories of goods or three categories of items that companies will definitely will look for suppliers and they negotiate with suppliers and they fix a deal. So all of these suppliers of entering goods, foundation goods, facilitating goods are all going to be a part of the supply chain, and they are going to be constantly in relationship with the manufacturing firm, and they will be supplying these goods over a period of time. So in detail, what are your entering goods? All those raw materials. So these could be farm products, these could be natural products if you're looking at dairy products and all those groceries and FMCG commodities that we purchase. Or this could also be, components, materials, parts, all those numerous things that are purchased by manufacturers that becomes a part of the product, that becomes a part of the main product that we are building, and that product when it is sold in the market, those components also are become a part of that particular product. So it's a variable component. So every time we make a commodity and then we sell that commodity, that product, then we need to repurchase these parts and materials again, because only when we repurchase can we make the next product. So that's the difference that you see here, and those type of goods are called entering goods. Foundation goods, these are long-term assets that I said, these are physical assets like buildings, land, fixed equipment, all those huge machinery that you see in a factory, all those fixed installations that you see in a plant layout. All of these are going to be recurring, right? These are not variable products. These are recurring, which means you can use them again and again, right? You can use these assets again and again. You're not going to, for example, if you have a machinery with which you are making a commodity, for making the next product, you don't buy another machinery. It's the same machinery, it's the same equipment that's going to be used for all the products that are going to be uh, utilized. So that's where we look at the use of assets, machinery and equipment in the organization. So we need to look for some, suppliers who supply these assets and all these capital equipments that are required, capital assets that are required for the organization. So those are called foundation goods. Lastly, as I said, there are facilitating products. So there are suppliers of facilitating products. So these could be maintenance and repair support services, or all those regular maintenance. So you have a company that comes and does regular maintenance, or you have a company that gives you quality support. There is advisory support, consultancy. So you could be hiring a consultancy firm and you could be paying consultancy charges to them. Then all these logistic providers, all those supplier, people in the supply chain, like warehousing services or transportation services or grading, services of grading. For example, when to check your quality of your product and to certify your product that it is of a good quality. So grading agencies are there, grading agencies and grading companies, so they will be there. And if you're going to be exporting, then you have the F&Bs who will come in, right? So they will also be agencies who will also be helping you. The carriage and forwarding agents will also be there. So you will be paying necessary charges. So without these, players who help you with all these facilitation and support services, a firm will not be able to operate its businesses and it will not be able to run. So these are facilitating products. So there are three types of goods in B2B that we deal. So you've got to remember this very clearly: entering goods, foundation goods, and facilitating goods. Okay, then we go to the next one. So these are three type of goods that we typically use. And then there are different players. Like for example, you have commercial enterprises. So commercial enterprises, who are the B2B buyers? So that is what we are talking about here. So if there is an organization, that is in the B2B business, now who are the other business, buyers, other business sellers from whom you are buying, right? So one could be indirect channel members and facilitators. So on one side, you could be directly operating with one company. So that's when we call it a direct channel partner. Direct channel partner is you are contacting one supplier and you are placing an order for maybe 20 different equipments. So there is one supplier who is that particular point of contact to whom you are ordering, placing an order for 10 different components that you are going to be using for your manufacturing. So 10 different entering goods you are placing an order. So this is a direct channel. Now that particular seller to whom you are placing an order, right? So for those 10 products, that supplier could further contact another 10 different individual suppliers and then place an order for those 10 different commodities. So you have one point of contact, and that supplier who's that point of contact will in turn place orders with another 10 different suppliers, and then they go about supplying to that main supplier or that main seller from whom your organization is buying. So there are several direct partners and there are also several indirect partners. When you go back to that Harley Davidson example, right? For an example, we said Harley Davidson depends on 200 different suppliers. So can you imagine for Harley Davidson to be maintaining relationships, direct relationships with all those 200 suppliers? It's a very impossible task. 200 different suppliers on your supply list, and then you have to contact each one of them and then go about. So that itself will require huge, you need a big setup to only be coordinating, negotiating with these people, and then trying to ensure that they are delivering goods on time. So that's a big challenge. And then you need a big manpower team. You need to hire more people to only be part of the procurement process. So what companies generally do, they don't break their head by directly getting into contact with 200 suppliers. They will contact main distributors. They will contact main distributors or main suppliers. So these main distributors and suppliers are vested with the responsibility of, of supplying to Harley Davidson. So those main distributors will in turn identify all those different small sellers of those various components, and they will in turn place an order with those 50 to 60 or 70 different suppliers, place the order, negotiate terms and conditions with them, and so they will do all of that. So for Harley Davidson, it is just one company, one or two or three major suppliers, and they supply all those 200 items for them. So that's how it operates in the B2B market. So there is a direct channel, and there are also several indirect channels. So I give contract as a manufacturer, I give contract to one particular supplier, and that particular supplier will in turn, give subcontracts and then be able to source the several goods that the organization requires. That is one. Second thing is organizations will also B2B, manufacturers often will contact OEMs. OEMs are original equipment manufacturers. So these are some of the major components that your organization is going to use for manufacturing of goods. These original equipment manufacturers are going to be in direct contacts, and then they are going to be making those components according to the requirement of the organization, according to the requirement of your product. So every time you have a different product that you are manufacturing, the OEM sometimes will change. It will not be the same original equipment that will go and become a part of the product according to the model of the product, according to the type of the product, according to the usability of the product, according to those terms and conditions and so on. The OEMs will also be able to do that. So that is how we look at these things. Like for example, when you look at a computer, right? So you have, if you're using a HP laptop, the original equipment manufacturer that HP or Dell would contact would be Intel. We are the main suppliers of the software system that enables the entire laptop to function. And there again, if you see Intel as an original equipment manufacturer is not going to supply the same kind of software or the processor for all the systems. According to the type of computer, according to the usability, according to the features that are loaded into the computer by a manufacturer, so they are going to make appropriate processors that are going to suit the functionality and to ensure that the features of that particular product are enabled and the consumer is able to get that first hand experience. So that's there. And thirdly, there are users. So ultimately, we're also looking at customers with whom we are contacting, and then we look at selling it to them, and then also ensuring that there is enough feedback that we receive. So direct, consumers will also be able to give us a lot of information on the basis of which we will be able to sell as such. So in the B2B, it operates like that. So there is a channel called the B2B channel. And so there are several contacts that are there in the B2B that are part of the supply chain. And then the main commodity is sold to the B2C, where the ultimate consumer is going to be the buyer and the user of the product. So there are commercial enterprises. So that is one network. Second, we have governmental organizations. Sometimes, as an organization, you will also be selling to governments. You will also be selling to government. You will also be buying a lot of things from the government. So that's also there. So wherever you have governmental organizations and agencies that are involved, wherein the government sources these products so that they could supply or sell to the public at large. So that is when sometimes you can also get a government contract, and those contracts, in those government contracts, government becomes the buyer and you become the seller according to the requirement of the government, according to the cost and the terms and conditions that they give you. You have to manufacture the good and you have to be able to do that. A simple example of that would be government sometimes to encourage students in government colleges. So what they do is the government issues free laptops. So when they give free laptops, so they need to manufacture these laptops. The government is not a manufacturer per se. So what do? They look for vendors and they give out a proposal saying that the government has this project where they would want to supply 20 lakh laptops to the people within the state. All those children who are studying in 12th standards and then in colleges pursuing their degree. So it's a scheme where we are going to offer laptops to all those children who are studying in government schools. So if there is any, if there are any OEMs, if there are any original equipment manufacturers who are interested to take up the government project and then fulfill, if you think that's a good prospect for you, then companies will bid for it, and then the government will look at the bids and then they will identify whoever is the bidder with who's offered to operate this project or run this project and deliver those laptops at a cost lesser than what the government or equal to what the government has decided will get the contract. So once the contract is given, so you become a seller and then you start supplying to the government and those agencies will in turn supply it and give it to those beneficiaries of those schemes. And then there are several institutions, government institutions and private institutions that you will have to deal with if you have to operate your business. So it's a big network that we see. When we generally talk about a supply chain is not a linear chain. It's not like one after another. It's generally a network. It's a cluster where you have several operators, all kinds of operators, direct operators, indirect operators, OEMs, facilitating operators, foundation operators, right? So you have so many different players that you will have to contact and operate with if you have to run this business. So that's where the efficiency of the supply chain is extremely important for the success of a B2B, business, right? So that is where you need to understand these dynamics. So that's where we are entering into supply chain, right? So business to business generally operates on a supply chain, right? The success of any firm in the B2B is generally dependent on the supply chain. How well are all the various functions, all those operators who are selling entering goods, all those operators who are selling foundation goods, and all those operators who are selling facilitating goods, how all of them are able to come together, work together in coordination, understand the requirement of the manufacturer or the manufacturing firm, and then be able to do things accordingly. So generally, when I talk about supply chain, I give people an example of a relay race, right? Supply chain is akin to a relay race. So in a relay race, if you look at a four into 100 meters, it is not often dependent. Winning that particular race is not dependent on just one player or one athlete. It depends on how the other three athletes are going to do. So here again, the same context. If a B2B firm has to do well, it is not the success is not dependent on that firm alone. That firm alone will not be able to do it, because that firm will be able to do only when all those 50 to 70 different players are able to understand the seriousness, are able to understand the requirement aspects of the firm, and then are able to deliver. So only when all those, when I give you that example of Harley Davidson, only when all those 200 suppliers of Harley Davidson are able to ensure that their goods reach the manufacturer at the right time when they are starting their production or when it's part of the process, and then when those goods are available, that's when the entire production can happen on time, the entire distribution can happen on time, and then the goods will be available in the market when the customer requires. So that's where supply chain management is extremely important. The success of a B2B depends on the supply chain. So that's where supply chain is a fundamental part of how a business operates, right? And different users are part of this particular business. So that's when we need to understand and know how to manage these. The two common transactions are B2C and B2B. So when it comes to selling goods and services, so we understand that. So in B2C, the goods and services are sold to a consumer who is the end user of the product. So ultimately, it's like you go to a store, you get the product, and then you get back home, right? So that last point of contact, right? So mostly the retailers in the B2C market are the point of contact from where you will get those goods. But just imagine what is the activity that is taken in the back end to make sure that those goods are made available at the store. So at the time when you go, you see the product, you like it, you pick it up, you put it into your basket, you go to the billing, you pay, and you are out. So just see the kind of effort that has gone into ensuring that the product is made available in the store at the time when you come. So that back-end operation is supply chain, and that's where the entire B2B is operating, right? So if you see those images that I put on the slide, you get a good understanding of all of this, right? So that's how the whole thing is managed. You can understand the kind of effort, the kind of negotiation, the kind of pushing that happens to make sure that all of them in the supply chain are able to operate and understand, like a relay race, and then be able to do their part and take care of their responsibility very well. So, however, in B2B, goods and services are sold between companies. like the difference we saw. The relationships are integral. So integral to a business, and it's important to understand how their supply chains vary to suit their business model. So you need to understand this. If Harley Davidson has a particular business strategy and they operate on a business model by which they are going to sell to the consumers who are buyers and users of Harley Davidson. So as I said, this particular company depends on 200 different suppliers, right? So they depend on 200 different suppliers. And Harley Davidson expects that the 200 different suppliers also understand the importance and the kind of strategy that Harley Davidson follows. And then they want the 200 suppliers also to match Harley Davidson's expectation and requirement in the same manner that Harley Davidson expects from these 200 suppliers. So what you need to understand here, the difficulty is the 200 suppliers are in 200 different types of business environments. So it's not the same. They operate in different geographies. Their industry dynamics are very different, and how they, the kind of functioning of their own respective business is very different. So it depends on many things. Hence, their business model is also very different. So expecting all the 200 suppliers who are not making the same component, you must understand 200 suppliers are making 200 different kinds of components. So they have 200 different types of varieties in which they do 200. They could be more than about 10 to 20 different locations. They could be around the world as well, right? And their business models could also be according to the component that they are making. The business model that a tire company uses is very different to a business model that a two-wheeler battery operator uses. It's very different. Two different components. So two different types of business dynamics and two different business models in which they operate, right? So the challenge is how do all these companies adjust their business models, adjust their business strategies, and then be able to cater to a particular a buyer who is placing orders from them. So often you will experience differences in negotiation approach, how long the supply chain lasts, and how many customers are involved, and the number of items ordered. So there's a big list of things that we look at, right? So for each of these players, according to their business dynamics, according to their strategy, according to their business models, Harley Davidson will have to negotiate with them, right? So and then negotiate, and then be and then have the supplier to accept and agree with your demands. That's one thing. Second thing, another very important criteria that companies will always look for is something called the lead time or the cycle time. If I place an order with the supplier, within what time can you supply those components to my factory? That's the question. How many hours will you take? How many days will you take? How many weeks will you take? So for Harley Davidson will not leave it to the supplier, or no B2B manufacturer will tell the supplier, you decide the time in which you want to supply to us. They will not give it to the supplier because it is your company's product that you are manufacturing. Harley Davidson has made a promise to the customer that these bikes will be built within this particular cycle time and it will be made available to you at the time when you come and book your bikes. So within that time, Harley Davidson will have to ensure that this entire business process, this entire supply chain is managed, and then the product is made available at the time, at the promised time. So they have to negotiate. So Harley Davidson has mapped out a plan, has chalked out a plan for all the suppliers in the supply chain, and it's going to give them certain time and say, I want this to be done within this particular period. So which means the lead time is, 48 hours. The moment I place an order for about a minimum of 100 quantity, I need those 100 quantities to be delivered within 48 hours. So that's the lead time. Only if the supplier is ready, has the capacity, has the capability, has the experience, has the efficiency to make something within 48 hours and supply to a seller, supply to a buyer, that is where Harley Davidson or any other manufacturer will say, okay, that's fine, so we will accept you. If a particular supplier fails to supply within that particular time, and if he defaults on two or three different occasions, when there is absolutely no reason for why the delay has taken place. If the reason is not convincing and realistic enough, then the company will decide to drop that supplier, and then they'll start looking for another vendor. So like this, you have to do negotiations with almost 200 different suppliers, right? So that is where companies find it extremely difficult, as I told you. So they don't directly deal with all the 200 suppliers. So they are going to look for main suppliers, main distributors or main suppliers. So once Harley Davidson strikes a certain negotiation with the main supplier, and the main supplier is vested with the responsibility, and he accepts, that supplier accepts and says, yes, I'm going to deliver to you at this particular cost, at this particular price, at this particular time, then the rest of it is the headache of that main supplier. The main supplier will in turn contact 50 to 60 or 70 different suppliers, small time, wherever they are, and then be able to purchase it, and then be able to sell it at the price that Harley Davidson has fixed, and at the price at which the main supplier has accepted. So that's how it completely operates here, right? So negotiation in supply chains can involve payment terms. So when are we going to? So we have to strike a deal there. So in B2B, you need to understand your payment term is a very important criteria. Okay, because you understand most of the business in B2B happens on credit. It does not happen on cash sales. It happens on credit, right? So like for example, in the B2C, it happens on ready sale. It happens on ready sale, or it happens on cash sale. So which means you want to buy a product in the B2C market. So what do? You go to a store, you go to a factory, and then you can place an order. The moment the factory or the store is ready to give you the product, you pay immediately, and then you buy it. Or even if you ask for credit is just going to be given to you in about 48 24 hours or 48 hours, and they're going to say, okay, within 2 days you make the payment, right? So you make the payment, we'll give you the product. So that's how it is. So it's often on ready sale, it's often on cash sale, it's often the completion of sale immediately takes place. So the moment you pay the money, you become the owner of the product. Title of ownership for that particular product is transferred to you immediately. So in B2C, there is absolutely no problem. Only if B2C, the credit chances will be given only if the B2C buyer is a bulk buyer. Only if you are buying in bulk, and then the B2B, the main supplier feels that here is somebody who is buying 50 at the same time, 50 quantity at the same time. So you give them some time and say, okay, within 2 days you can make the payment. Why? Because you don't want to lose out on that big order. So that's a very circumstance based kind of a decision that we take. We don't have a rule like that, but companies generally do that, or sellers in the B2C will generally do that because they don't want to lose out on the business. But in B2B, it's not like that. In B2B, the sale is going to be, the relationship between the suppliers and the supply chain is going to be continuous. It's not a one time like the way you see in B2C. In B2C, it is like that. If you're buying a product, and then you pay it and you take it. So when is this customer going to come back again and buy the same commodity? Nobody knows, because a lot of time these items could be purchased as a one-time purchase, and you could buy that only after 3 years or 4 years, or sometimes you may not come to buy at all. So there is no continuous relationship with the customer. But in the B2B is where you have a continuous relationship, because those 200 suppliers to whom, for suppliers from whom you are purchasing all these components, raw materials, and all those various supplies that you are, all those input factors, you need to constantly have a recurring relationship. It's a relationship that's going to continue, right? So it is often based on relationship. So you need to negotiate, and in the negotiation, there's often a give and take that generally happens. You cannot be very hardcore and be very strong in bargaining, because you have to go back to the same supplier again. So it's often a give and take. So most suppliers generally will give in the first instance, because it's a new order that they are getting from the buyer. So they don't want to lose it. So they generally tend to accept whatever the buyer or the main manufacturer is telling them, and accordingly they will respond to it. But later on, once they know the relationship is done, and then the business is established, then slowly they will try to recover this So whatever they've lost in the beginning, they'll try to get. So that's a strategy that various companies will play out. So that's what we talk about. That's where the payment terms become very important. So most of the time, so minimum as a thumb rule in the industry, we keep it a minimum of 3 months. So whatever sales, whatever purchases have happened, every 3 months it is customary to be settling credit. So at least some payment keeps coming up. If not the whole, at least you keep paying up in different intervals because everybody needs the cash flows in their organization if they have to run. So working capital otherwise gets disturbed. So that's where the receivables and the payments are generally taken care by the finance department. Then you have performance indicators. So there's always a criteria that you are fixing for what kind of goods are you accepting and then allowing that to come into your factory. So there's always a standard, there's always a specification that you are giving to your various vendors. So at the time of calling in for vendors to supply, or when you're doing vendor analysis, you are very particular that you are giving them the various criteria, and that's the criteria on the basis of which the suppliers will have to supply, and that's how you evaluate them regularly. And these indicators are also very important, whether to accept those commodities or whether to reject. If something is not matching the performance criteria or is not matching the specifications that you've listed for entering goods and foundation goods, you reject it because a faulty asset or a faulty component or a faulty not so a substandard component, if it comes into your product, if it's part of the entering good, then it's going to become a part of the main product, and then the whole product can malfunction just because of one component, because it was of a substandard quality, right? Because it was not up to the specification that was specified by the manufacturer. So that's why this is very important. Price and quantity, those negotiations also do happen depending on the demand that we are able to see in the B2C. Accordingly, those kind of negotiations do happen in the supply chain. So in B2B relationships, there is a significant level of negotiation, and that occurs in the supply chain. So there's always this give and take. If you remember Porter's five forces model, there we talk about one force called the bargaining power of suppliers. So that is this. The bargaining power of suppliers is even the suppliers want to make profits. So if you have those 200 suppliers supplying to Harley Davidson, all the 200 will also want to ensure that their profit margins are not disturbed. Even if Harley Davidson is a very big player, Harley Davidson is like a big company that they all want to be associated with. And Harley Davidson is not going to pick up anybody who says that I'm a vendor, I'm a supplier. They have their own stringent quality checks and they have their own parameters, and then they ensure that only the best suppliers in the industry in that particular supply market are the ones who will be accepted. So it's a very high performance standard that Harley Davidson will lay out. So there's always this bargaining power that will also be there, right? So for all those vendors who want to be part of the Harley Davidson supply chain, will do everything to make sure that they're part of the supply chain, because it's a very prestigious thing for you in the industry if you tell that I'm a supplier to Harley Davidson. So you don't want to lose out on that. So in these cases, Harley Davidson will have a bigger bargaining power because Harley Davidson is an established brand, and all the suppliers need to be linked or they want to do business with an established brand. If it is any other small operator, then if the supplier is a very big supplier is going to negotiate. Like for example, the success of a laptop, success of any computer today depends on the microprocessor that is used. So Intel today has a very bigger bargaining power. It's a very good example. Intel is a supplier of processors, but the functioning of your laptop, whether it is HP or Dell or whether it's Lenovo, it depends on your microprocessor. So today, Intel is in a condition to dictate terms to HP and Dell. It can tell HP and Dell that if you don't accept to the price at which I'm going to sell my microprocessors, then I will not be able to do business with you. So HP, Dell, Lenovo, all of them need Intel today, because people today, as a customer, when you go, you're looking at which is the processor that it's running. Is it i3? Is it i5? So that is a very important criteria when you go about making decisions. So you got to understand this bargaining power, whether it's the supplier who's big or whether it's the manufacturer who's big. The manufacturer is big, then the supplier will have to go low. So manufacturer has a bigger bargaining power. But if the supplier is a big guy, then the supplier needs to, will have a bigger bargaining power. Another example that I'll give you is Walmart. The Walmart is a retailer, right? Walmart does not manufacture any of its goods; it only buys. But Walmart is a big quantity seller. It's the largest retailer. The kind of sales. So any manufacturer of any commodity, which is the FMCG category or grocery or any other category for that matter, they need Walmart. Because the moment you tied up with Walmart, Walmart is going to guarantee you sales of more than about a minimum of 50 units per day in one particular store, which means 50 units of your commodity gets sold if you are there in Walmart minimum. So the maximum can be any number depending on the flow of consumers who come and order. So these are all very interesting cases when you look at how the entire B2B operates. So very important is how do you ensure that you pick the right players to be part of your supply chain? What are the terms and conditions with which you are going to negotiate with them on terms of price, in terms of cost, in terms of delivery schedules, and in terms of also any other kind of innovation that your company is making? These supply chains will also have to be ready. If you make a new product cannot be built only by the manufacturer. You also need those suppliers to be able to make those components that are going to be part of your new product. So it's a very complex kind of a decision, and but it needs to be well dealt if the company has to see success. So when a company is trying to manage their stock control, they will try and optimize supply chain deliveries and quantity amounts to suit their warehouse capacity. So what happens? What are the various operations in supply chain? Right? So when you say supply chain, what are the kind of things that happens? The first thing is procurement. Procurement is the first activity in supply chain where you're bringing all the raw materials and components that you require. Then in Michael Porter, go back to Michael Porter's value chain, right? In the primary functions, we talk about inbound logistics, we talk about operations, we talk about outbound logistics. So what does that mean? So when you look at all those kind of activities that Michael Porter talks about in his value chain, the first activity is procurement, procuring all the raw materials from various places, wherever they are available. That's the first thing. Second, inbound logistics is wherever these raw materials and component suppliers are there, you have to bring transportation. So you have to transport those raw materials to your factory at a very in a cost effective manner. So transportation has to be done efficiently. Second thing. Third is manufacturing operations, manufacturing. So in the manufacturing is where manufacturers will make this decision of whether to make the whole product ourselves or whether to outsource, right? So if you want to make the whole product, then the cost is very high. But today, when you see the supply chain market, there are several players who are experts in certain products that they manufacture. So you don't have to take up the headache. So you outsource it to them. So that's where we take the make or buy decision. So whether making is cheaper or whether buying is cheaper, accordingly we make a decision. And once those goods are made, then it has to be stocked in warehouses. That's where we're talking about this part in the slide. Stocking inventory is also very important. And when we say inventory also has a certain cost associated with it. The company has to bear that inventory cost, right? So why you keep inventory is to make sure that you don't run out of stock when you supply these goods in the market. So when your customer is going to come and look for goods, if they want to buy, those goods should be available. So as soon as stocks keep going down, inventory levels in the various selling points continue to go down, you need to stock your inventory and make sure that minimum SKU is kept in all of these, in all these selling points. So that's where you need to manage how much to procure, how much to produce, how much to ensure that it's available in stock, and then you have to do those stock calculations depending on how sales is taking place in the B2C. It's a very big decision that you will have to take. So B2B supply chains are generally shorter in B2C compared to B2C. So that's where in B2C we have a long, we talk about in marketing, you would have studied zero level marketing, zero level distribution channel, one level distribution channel, two level. So generally B2C is a very spread out kind of a market. So which means we want to ensure that the product, our product, my company's product is available to every customer in nook and corner. Wherever they go to buy this product, it should be made available. So that is where we go in for extensive distribution of goods. So that is where we take a whole channel. So we take a stockist, and sometimes there is a super stockist, there is a stockist, and then there are a whole lot of wholesalers. Then there are multiples of retailers in nook and corner. So wherever the customer is, you make sure that you have a supply point, you have a selling point, you have a store. So that's where the B2C is very, very wide. So generally, it has a minimum of 4 levels, 5 levels, and 6 levels is where you will see supply chain in the B2C. Whereas in B2B, it is not like that. You will minimum have just 3 levels, minimum maybe one or two, and then maximum you will have just about 3 to 4 levels. That's all. Because as I was giving you that example, 200 suppliers. You don't have to contact all the 200 suppliers. You contact five main suppliers or distributors. So your contact is only five. Those five in turn will have their own suppliers, and very often it is a direct relationship that they will have, and that's how you do it. So within about 2 or 3 channels, you will be able to finish your entire supplying, procure everything that you require for manufacturing. So the challenge here is managing this, right? What is the criteria that you've given to these five main suppliers, and how those five main suppliers are going to break their head and then contact those various suppliers, and then various subcontracting and kind of negotiations that they have. So ultimately, it all depends on how well the whole thing is managed, and then to make sure that the good is available at the time when companies require. So B2B companies usually have to manage their stock, as I told you, because they want to ensure that they should not be running out of stock. Now, what happens when you run out of stock is you're giving an opportunity to your competitor to sell their goods. So when I go looking for product A, and if product A is not available in the store, what do I do? If I'm really desperate and I'm not so brand loyal, and I want a product immediately. If product B is available, then I pick it up and go. And if I'm happy with product B, I didn't try it, but I got an opportunity to try it because product A was not available in the store. So when I buy product B, and if I'm very happy with that experience, then I say I never thought that product B will be good, right? So from the next time onwards, you could switch from product A to product B, and you can become a customer. So sometimes stock out in a store could lead to a loss of sale, because at the time when the customer came looking for product A was not available. So that is a loss of sale. And the customer bought product B, and then he was very happy with product B, and he was very happy with brand B. So the next time onwards, he continues to buy brand B. So that leads to a loss of customer. So that is what can happen. It's a huge impact. I'm just giving you one example of one customer, but if it's seen on an aggregate level, it's a huge thing. So that's why we need to manage stock and production, and then ensure that we don't increase our cost, because all of this is also cost. If you're running a supply chain to make sure that the good is made available to a customer, you incur a cost, and that cost has to be managed within that cost factor that you have kept. So it cannot be transferred to the customer, because again, prices are very competitive in the industry. You cannot increase the MRP, because the moment you increase your MRP, law of demand is going to operate. That point of price sensitivity or the law of demand is going to play up over there. So you've got to be very careful. So you've got to manage your supply chain in such a manner that you keep your cost of production, cost of distribution, everything low, and that the total landed cost of the product should be the lowest. Only then you will be able to offer that price advantage. You will be able to offer discounts. All of that can happen to a customer. So that's why getting to understand the supply chain is a very, very important aspect in B2B, right? So that is where this is going to be seen. So what is your marketing strategy? So why supply chain becomes extremely important when you're taking lessons in B2B is that you have to understand how to operate with these various suppliers of entering goods, of foundation goods, facilitating goods. What kinds of terms and conditions? What kind of negotiations? What kind of payment terms? What kind of responsibilities are you going to expect from them, and what you want them to deliver? And then how you manage all of this is the crux of how you go about doing it. So that is where, when you're formulating B2B strategies, we need to keep this entire dynamics in mind. And all of this again will not happen the way you think. It all is going to play out in the business environment. So if the business environment is favorable, then all of this is going to work for you, for your advantage. But if it's not favorable, if everything is going against whatever plans you've made, then you'll have to wait and watch and be a lot more careful. And in that melee, you will lose out a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of losses will also happen. So that's why you need to apply all your management lessons, all your experience, and understanding your reading of the market, be able to make some speculative guesses, and then have some real suppliers who are part of your supply chain who will back you at any given cost. You should have that kind of a network that you need to build. So that's the kind of relationship that you should build. So when we come into module 3, we will be looking at more of it, about how to build this relationship and what are the terms and conditions on which the entire B2B industry and the whole supply chain is going to work. So that's where we will look at all of those lessons when we come back in the next class. Right, so this is where with this presentation, this part, we've finished the first part of module 1. The second part is customer value proposition. So that is something that we will start tomorrow, and then we will take that when we come back for classes later on. Okay, right, any questions so far? Anything with whatever we've discussed? If you have anything to ask me?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, great. So I can ask you questions in the next class.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so next class we're going to have question and answer, and that is going to be an evaluation of how well you've understood, and when we come into some cases and some small exercises that I'm going to give you, that's where all of this that I spoke to you today will be useful. Okay. All right then. So we'll meet you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a class. So we'll start with CVP. It's called Customer Value Proposition. So that's where we'll learn a few more lessons extending it. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can always put it in the LMS. You can always put it in the LMS, or you can put it in the WhatsApp group. So I can put it in the LMS, and then we can have a discussion on that. So we don't have to restrict it to only question and answer that we have in class. If you have a question, put it in the B2B group, and I will open a discussion forum and post that in the LMS, and then all of you can have a discussion. So all of you can share some points on that, so we can always go ahead and continue doing this. Okay. All right then. So thank you so much, and we'll meet tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
sir.
You, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.